I don't want no oil a-spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!
Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and I'm here with my fantastic co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
Yes, together, Rebecca and I are about to craft an unforgettable hour of radio called For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment. And we talk about it in the ways that it affects you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and your families and your coworkers and the big herons and the little fish and the worms in the ground and the bees and the bugs and pretty much everything and everyone, because all of us are together here on this tiny little planet called Earth. And we have a typically excellent show lined up for you today. We are just going to chat for another 15 minutes or so here about various topics. Then we have an interview with Sandy Bihn. We've had her on before. She's with a group called Water Keepers.
BIHN.
Yeah, correct. And she's going to be talking about a situation where the Ohio EPA has finally come up with some regulations to limit the amount of phosphorus going into Lake Erie and causing those algae blooms. But it's done a sucky job. And she's going to go into more detail about that. Then we're going to hear from our wonderful advertisers and patrons whom we love dearly. And then Rebecca, what will you be telling us about today?
Colonel Charles Young, a slightly less shallow dive.
Okay, yeah, Colonel Charles Young.
We mentioned him before.
Yes. And then,
but it's part of a list, because he's going to get his own thing now.
Good, yeah, because he deserves it.
Yes.
Then we're going to hear ecological news, and a lot of very interesting ecological news happening this week, man. And that's it. That's our show, except for the part where you call in, and we're hoping that you do call in the next hour at 877-909-1007. Or if you're kind of shy and don't actually like talking on the radio, you can text us at 419-973-5841. That's 419-973-5841. And this little part in the beginning where we just sort of chat is going to be a little bit schizophrenic this week because I have something really terrible to talk about and then something really cool, really fun to talk about. So let's get the terrible stuff out of the way first.
Strictly speaking, it's going to have dissociative identity disorder.
Yes. And what?
Not schizophrenia.
Okay,
schizophrenia is not multiple personality syndrome.
Right, okay.
In fact, there is no such thing as dissociative identity disorder. Never mind, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Rebecca, for... Yeah. Okay, well, anyway, here's the first personality.
Random facts with Becca.
Whatever. There is right now ongoing in Columbiana County in Ohio, which is on the border with Pennsylvania. It's on the eastern edge of Ohio. There is an ecological disaster going on right this minute. It's a huge train derailment. You might have heard about that. A bunch of cars off the tracks. There's about 50 cars off apparently. About 10 of them are actually burning. There's been explosions. And one of the things about it is that on the news they are saying that one of those cars is quote unquote specially designed to protect its cargo. And the officials, the voice of officialdom, are saying that car, no need to worry, that car is operating as designed and protecting its contents from the fire.
Okay, but is it protecting us from the contents also? Does it seems to be all about protecting the content. What about the people? What is it? What you said? I'm not sure it's the same thing.
That is a good point. That is a good point. But the scary part about all this is that they're refusing to tell us what those contents are.
But whatever they are, there's a car specially designed to protect them, which is very reassuring.
Right, but this is, folks, this is what you literally call censorship. This is censorship in action. They know.
And very clumsy, obvious, that leaves a giant footprint
right.
where you can see something's missing.
Right, they know what's in these cars. They're just not telling us.
Right.
Because they don't trust us to know what's happening. And that reminded me of something that happened to me way back in 1986. I was living in Dayton, Ohio, and my wife was pregnant with our first son at the time. And we were having breakfast at Denny's, and we look out the window, and here comes this white mist creeping up from the Mad River. And we're like, what the heck is that? And it kept getting closer and closer to the restaurant. And we, said, well, all right, we're getting out of here. We paid our bill, and everyone else was just continuing to eat breakfast. And I sort of announced to the restaurant, you guys might want to leave because we don't know what this big cloud is. And then my wife and I, we fled. We drove up north of Dayton and stopped at a hotel. And it took like a couple hours, but finally the radio news came on, and there had been a train derailment. And there was a tanker car that caught fire, and it was burning. It was full of white phosphorus, which was not terribly deadly. It caused a lot of irritations and can hurt your lungs if you're out running around in it. But most people just sort of sat there and let this cloud envelop them. And we ran because it wasn't that long after Bhopal, where India had what's called methyl isocyanate, a very similar white cloud that came and engulfed everybody.
Did they actually bother to tell anybody that the cloud was coming?
No.
No. Okay, yeah, so sometimes they don't do that.
Right, and in that case, people did die because the methyl isocyanate was deadly. And, so when officials withhold important information like that, people can die and people can get hurt, and people with asthma did not do well during that cloud of white phosphorus. And so so boo on the Ohio EPA and the federal EPA and the 25 different agencies which are surrounding that fire, because none of them are telling us what we need to know. That is what is in those tank cars and what is burning. So that's the unfortunate news that's happening right now. So now back over to complete change in tone. Yesterday I had a very nice walk along the Maumee River with a friend, and we were walking along and we saw something out on the ice, and I think I spotted an otter.
Oh boy.
Yeah, there's been some news over at Providence Metro Park. People have spotted this pair of otters, and there's actually put some video on Facebook and YouTube and stuff of this beautiful pair of healthy-looking otters on the Maumee River. And I wanted to talk about that because I wanted, we hear all this doom and gloom about the environment, but we have to remember that the environment is really resilient, and all we have to do is stop destroying it, and it will come back. So, as long as nobody goes out and shoots or traps those otters, they will repopulate the Maumee, and we will once again have otters on the Maumee River. And, that would be wonderful because they're just amazing creatures to look at, so fun and playful. They're what they call, they're some of those cute mammals that are so important. And so I think that we also have to remember that's true of all these environmental problems. Like, for example, global warming. Yes, we are caught in a positive feedback loop in that the more carbon we put into the air, the more carbon gets released, and so temperatures are skyrocketing. But if we break that loop, temperatures will even out. Temperatures will start going back down. The natural processes of the Earth will take the excess carbon out of the air, and we'll get back to equilibrium. And that's really important to remember whenever you're listening to these terrible doom and gloom stories, because as long as we don't actively destroy nature, nature will come back and will support us and give us what we need. So what do you think? 877-909-1007. And I think this might be a good time to look at our interview with Sandy Bihn, because here's another situation. We know that the phosphorus that we're putting into the lake are causing these terrible algal blooms, which are killing fish and putting these toxic chemicals into the water that cause brain damage and all kinds of stuff. But if we stop doing that, the lake will come back. It'll even out and it'll get healthy again. And we saw that happen actually back in the 70s and 80s when we got rid of the point source pollution, the things like sewage treatment plants and so forth. Oh, and that was one of the things I saw on my walk. It was the first time I walked down past the sewage treatment plant in Perrysburg on the river there, and I saw them flaring off the methane from the sewage treatment plant. And I was thinking, wow, two things. One, the sewage treatment that we started doing is a fantastic success story, because Lake Erie was dead until we started treating our sewage. Once we started treating our sewage, it came back and got healthy again. But two, we're also wasting all that methane. We could be storing all the energy from burning off that sewage gas. So that's a missed opportunity. But two, we need to look at the whole picture and take all our inputs and outputs and even them out and create them in a way that supports the lake instead of destroys the lake. And so that's why I interviewed Sandy Bihn about this current situation with this report that the Ohio EPA came out with on December 30th. And so let's go listen to that interview with Sandy Bihn. Okay, welcome to For a Green Future. Could you just tell us who you are and who you're with?
I'm Sandy Bihn. I'm with Lake Erie Waterkeeper.
All right. So, Sandy, I asked you on this week because something is a big problem for the region is sort of coming to a head. I'm talking about the pollution that causes the algal blooms in Lake Erie pretty much every summer now. Could you just give us a little background on that problem?
Well, the Clean Water Act requires that by the federal government through the states that they evaluate the waters. And if the waters have problems, that they create something called a total maximum daily load, or a TMDL. Some of us have been working a long time to have this happen, like 20 years. It should have happened a long time ago when the blooms really began, but it didn't. But anyway, we have excess nutrients in our waters, and therefore they have to be reduced. It's phosphorus, it's the driver here, that we need to have reduced. We've been trying to reduce it for the last 20 years, and we're not having any success. So it's come down to, we're going to have a total maximum daily load. We're going to determine where the sources are. We're going to have a plan to reduce it. And, hopefully that will work. And this evolved out of a consent decree from the federal court that requires this.
Now, we pretty much have an idea. We pretty much know there's been, as you say, we've been looking at this problem for 20 years. We pretty much know where these pollutants, where the phosphorus is coming from, don't we?
We certainly do. I mean, every scientific report says that about 90% of the source of this is coming from quote unquote agriculture. And we need to break agriculture down into the components of what in agriculture is delivering the phosphorus. And those two are commercial fertilizer and manure from livestock operations. And what we've seen through the years is a leveling off and a reduction in commercial fertilizer use. The animals that are coming, the livestock population here has grown orders of magnitude through the years. We've become a haven, if you will, for hog raising, dairy cows, and poultry. And all of those have grown in numbers, and they're with the big guys, that the JBSs, the Smithfields, that really drive the American system of big ag. And so they're confined animal feeding operations, much different than they used to be in the 70s, 60s, 50s, when animals were pastured and spread around in the fields more. And now they're confined. And the problem for water with that is, just taking out that piece of it, is that they produce a lot of manure, and especially hogs and cows. It's so much manure in such a small area that they have to place it in the fields as a liquid, which in our watershed is really a problem because it goes down to the field tiles, into the streams and out. And, that wasn't the case years ago. And this keeps growing and growing. And the state of Ohio refuses to really assess it as it is. And it keeps, we have a report from the University of Wisconsin and Marquette that shows that every time you add one of these confined operations, that the amount of phosphorus,
CAFOS as they're called. Yeah.
CAFO, AFO, yeah. That they actually are increasing the amount of dissolved phosphorus coming into the system. So we have, and those are from continuous monitoring wells that Heidelberg and Ohio EPA and USGS use. So
Right.
the data is credible.
Now, there have been quote unquote voluntary efforts to limit this that have been much publicized, but it seems like as the years goes by, that's also not very effective.
It's not been effective at all. And part of the reason for that is there's no accountability for it. They don't target the areas with the largest, sources that are coming in. It's a totally haphazard system that is not working. And, none of us would spend, excuse me, if we're going to fix a problem, we're going to try to put our money where we're going to get the greatest return. And in this case, the definition of greatest return is the greatest reduction in phosphorus. And none of these programs do that. I mean, they just don't target what the sources are. They band-aid it. They give money to everyone that wants it, literally, and that meets the criteria. And what they're doing isn't bad. Cover crops and two-stage ditches and stuff is good. They're good programs. But if you want to solve the algae problem, you have to reduce what's coming into the system, and we're not doing that. And the TMDL will not require them to do that, the proposed TMDL, and that's really troubling. So there's a forum this week on Wednesday where people can call in and learn about it. But a lot of us would really appreciate it if the public would, speak out and say this, CAFO problem is serious. The manure problem is serious. We have to stop bringing more and more into the system and adding more. And, we really need to reduce what we already have.
Now, you mentioned the consent decree. I mean, the way I'm understanding it, this is really kind of a federal EPA forcing the Ohio EPA to do something, right? Because the Ohio EPA has failed for decades.
And thanks to Lucas County and citizen groups and things, that it's happened. The problem, the TMDL is a conduit to make something happen. But in order for the TMDL to be effective, the public has to require it and literally speak out and make something happen. The TMDL in and of itself is just a plan and gives a lot of information, and a lot of it not good information, in this case from the state of Ohio with regard to livestock. They're using 2017 data from USDA. I mean, that's 5 years old already. A lot of modeling, not actual sampling, not targeting. I mean, it's really weak. So unless the public says this isn't going to work and we need to cry out, and unless the courts then decide that what Ohio is proposing is not adequate and that US EPA will step in and make it happen, this TMDL will not be effective.
You would say this is inadequate. So the federal EPA kind of threatened the Ohio EPA and said, if you don't come up with something, we will.
Right.
Do you think?
So Lucas County, and like I said, is just stepped up and done a great job in terms of contesting this, and that's what's brought it to the place where it's at right now. But if the Ohio keeps watering it down and doing what they're doing with regard to the manure and CAFO issue, we're not going to get to where we want to go. And the other problem is, they want to have, I give the example of a septic system failing that Ohio will require you as a property owner, a farmer, let's say, in the middle of fields where the manure is being applied all around you, and you have a family of 4 or 6 people, whatever it is, and those people have to replace their septic system because it's failing. They should have to replace it, and it should not be failing. So please don't hear that wrong. But all around them, millions of gallons of manure, liquefied manure are being put on the fields, that produce a lot more phosphorus and a lot more problems than what that one house is producing. And yet the state of Ohio will require the septic owner to replace the septic system, but will require the person applying the manure not to test, what's running off, not to make sure the soils, aren't already saturated, not to make sure it's coming out of the field tiles and into the streams. That's the problem.
Okay, so you sort of touched on my next question. What should the TMDL be calling for? And it sounds like definitely more testing.
Actually, just
careful.
targeting sources and targeting, so where the heaviest sources are coming from. And when you look at that, Lucas County has done a report on where the sources are at, and it clearly shows, every report that comes out, if you look at them, shows that the heaviest concentrations of phosphorus coming into the system, into Western Lake Erie, are coming from the areas with the CAFOS, the manure. That's where it's at. So you have to go there and then look at that and then require reductions, not just cover crops and whatever. You can't keep adding to the system a problem that isn't ever going to go away unless you reduce sources. We go back to the 70s when Lake Erie recovered. And the reason the lake recovered was because they required phosphorus reductions at wastewater plants. And that came a lot from taking phosphorus out of laundry detergent. But it was source reduction that recovered the lake. So management, once you get there, is a good thing. Once your lake is recovered and making sure it doesn't slide back. But management of a system that's getting too much in it, you've got to reduce what's coming into it. You can't just keep putting the same amount into it and managing more coming into it all the time. It's never going to work. There's not an example in the country anywhere in clean water on any circumstances of sources where we've had problems with water quality, where you haven't had to reduce what you're putting into the system, not managing it after it comes into the system. And that's the problem Ohio has with its H2 Ohio program and whatever.
Right.
They're good programs. That'd be great to manage it after this problem is fixed. This problem will not get fixed unless they reduce sources.
Okay. So you mentioned the hearing. This Wednesday's hearing is a hearing to sort of say how to testify at the public hearing. And then the public hearing itself is actually, is it February 23rd, I think?
I have to look at the dates. Yeah, it's on our website, and it's easily available. Just Google Ohio, Lake Erie, Ohio EPA, TMDL, or something like that. You'll find it.
And that's physically going to happen in Bowling Green.
You can physically be in Bowling Green, or there's virtual hearing for that, and there's a virtual hearing this week as well.
Right. And I just want to mention, I actually tried to register for the virtual hearing, and the link didn't work. So
I made it. It does work. So because I've been after them a couple of times. I've had some issues, but
it's working now.
Okay. Can't get me, and I'll help to register. I'll just register you. If somebody has a problem, email me, and I'll help you to register, and I'll make sure you can get on. We want as many people to attend as possible. It then underscores that there's public interest and public pressure to really do what's needed.
So they would email you where?
Sandy Lake Erie at AOL.com. SandyLakeErie at AOL.com.
Okay. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Just if you care about Lake Erie and you swim, bathe, fish, boat, whatever, birding, whatever that's related to the lake, care about these incredible waters and help us to build a community, a grassroots base that gets the state and the federal government to do what's needed to help the waters. Because without you, we cannot do what we need to do. We need public pressure. It's the only way the lake is going to recover is with the public taking a greater interest and speaking out that this isn't going to work and do something. And if the government sees that the public cares more, our chances of succeeding and doing something are much better.
Right. So that was our interview, and Sandy, of course, is absolutely right, as she usually is. that the government agencies, unfortunately, aren't going to just take care of you because that's their job. We have to actually prod and force them to do their job in most cases, which is a sad state of affairs, but that's what it's come down to. So anyway, now after that essential interview, we can go to our essential advertisers and patrons, because they are essential to keeping us on the air, and we're very grateful to them. For a Green Future is brought to you by the Ecofill Shop. The Ecofill Shop is located at 115 West Mary in Bowling Green, Ohio. They sell lots of different things: cosmetics, bath and body, home and garden, cleaning supplies, towels, knickknacks, candles, fragrances, and much more. They sell all these things without plastic containers. The whole purpose of the Ecofill Shop is to eliminate plastic. Customers love them, and I'm going to read from one of the testimonials you'd find on their website. Beth says, "From cleaning to cleaning products, Jossie and friends would make it easier to keep your house in order. The dish soap is effective and smells great. The carbon fiber cloth helped remove permanent marker from my coffee table. I highly recommend for all your natural cleaning needs." And that's just one of the many testimonials you'll find at ecofillshop.com. And I am one of those customers. Before I came in this morning, I shaved using my shaving brush and my little bar of shaving soap that I bought at the Ecofill Shop. And very smooth, I have to say, very smooth. If you're interested, you can call them at 419-944-8862. Talk to the owner, Jossie, who's very passionate about the environment. Or you could check out their website, ecofillshop.com. Or better yet, just drop in and visit them at 115 West Mary in Bowling Green, Ohio. That's the Ecofill Shop. And For Green Futures also brought to you by the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They restore wildlife habitats, and they lead people on outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy, from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. And there's several ways to get a hold of them. One is to call them at 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897. You could also go to their website, wcparks.org, or you could search for them on social media. Just search for WC Parks, and you'll find them on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc., etc. That is the Wood County Park District. And For a Green Future is also brought to you by our incredible patrons. And these are people who realize that if they really want all of us to get to a green future, some of us are going to have to make some sacrifices to make that happen. So they went to patreon.com, that's Patreon. They searched for a Green Future, up popped our cool Patreon page. They selected a monthly level of membership that matched their budget, and every month a little bit comes out of their accounts, comes over to us, and that's how we can manage to keep For a Green Future on the air. We're very grateful to them. And part of what we do with our time on the air is we give a little bit every week to Rebecca, who will enlighten us in various ways. Rebecca, what do you have for us this week?
Right. So in the past, we have mentioned Charles Young, who was the first African American superintendent of a national park. It says here, okay, I'm getting most of this from something website from somebody called the Dogwood Alliance, but also a lot more of it from the National Park Service History and Culture. Dogwood Alliance calls him Colonel Charles Young. National Park Service says he calls him Brigadier General. So I'm guessing that maybe he was a colonel when he was appointed the leader of the first group of rangers, and then eventually, because it seems very much like he was kind of doing national park stuff in between being sent off to do various wars by Teddy Roosevelt mostly.
Uh-huh. And this is apropos of Black History Month, correct?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Exactly. Okay. Yes. So it became the first national park superintendent in 1903 of Sequoia National Park, which we've mentioned in an episode where we found out that it's actually really tough to distinguish sequoias from redwoods because they're very similar on both a genetic and morphological level. But anyway, that was all happening in Sequoia National Park. He had a group of buffalo soldiers he was in charge of who were the first rangers. Their job was to contain wildfires and poachers and support the infrastructures, the various infrastructures. And apparently, Mr. Young, or whatever, Brigadier General Young was from something called Maeslick, Kentucky. He was born in 1864. Right after that, his father escaped slavery and went to go fight with the Buffalo Soldiers in I believe, the Civil War. So he did that, and the whole family moved across the river to what was it? Oh yeah, Ripley, Ohio, which was a big center of abolitionism at the time. So they were just kind of like, okay, we're just going to quietly sneak off while you're distracted. And apparently, Mr. Young was academically talented. His mom was educated during slavery, so somebody taught her to read and write and stuff.
That was illegal.
Yes, it was, but someone did it, and she was able to tutor him. So in addition to there was an integrated public school there apparently, or an integrated school of some kind. Mr. Young taught high school for a couple of years. He was mentored by the abolitionist John Parker. And he ended up going to the West Point Military Academy, graduated in 1889. Among other things, he fought in the Philippines-Americans War. He was sort of assigned to plan and teach the Wilberforce University's military science course, military and something science. What does this say? I can't tell. Anyway, yeah. So he was sort of in the early stages of ROTC there. He fought in the Spanish-American War. In 1903, it says here he was assigned to manage Sequoia National Park. Also, he trained. He went to Africa to train the Liberian army, and he fought against Pancho Villa in Mexico. When Pancho Villa was coming up and doing some raids in Texas or something.
Well, he was trying to keep us from taking Texas, I believe.
There you go, something like that. Yeah, so,
Yeah. So this guy was a good soldier and a good head of the Parks Department.
Yeah, he did a lot of stuff, sort of little wars of empire for Teddy Roosevelt. Mm. And in between times, he got to sort of, decompress and be out in nature and look for poachers, which probably were not as serious as the entire Cuban army and things. So.
And I believe, am I mistaken, that outside of Dayton, his farm is actually a national park now?
I don't know. I'd like to see that.
I believe cool. So, yeah, that there's a national park dedicated to him just east of Dayton. So
I've been to Dayton one time. I've never been to Cincinnati at all. I don't think I've been to Canton either.
Really?
Yeah, so
oh man.
I've not actually hit all the major Ohio cities, just sort of the northern ones and two out of the 3 big C's.
Huh. Well, we're going to have to get you over there.
Oh, yeah, clearly, yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Gotta do it.
Well, thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you
for that report. And now on to ecological news. And our first story actually is a follow-up to our last story last week. We reported on a company an American company that's operating out of Baja, California, called Making Sunsets. And this corporation decided to just take it on themselves and start geoengineering without any kind of permission or studies or anything. They said they released balloons containing sulfur dioxide up into the stratosphere, and they're planning to cool the planet that way and sell cooling credits and make a ton of money off of idiots. Oh, excuse me. But I say idiots because just going ahead and doing this ignores the possibility, all the possible things that could go wrong. And the update on this story is, happily, Mexico has now banned geoengineering. And and so that is very hopeful that Mexico has said, basically this American guy who lives in Baja, California, because it's cheap, said, I'm just going to send a balloon up and start doing stuff. And there's all kinds of possible side effects of this. One is you could cool things down too much. And it just so happens that right now, today, Mexico City is about 40 degrees below normal.
Oopsie doodle.
Yeah, and now we can't scientifically say
yeah.
that one thing caused the other, but we do know that when you put sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere, it hangs out there for about 2 years. And
there's a bunch of people there who cannot afford a sweater too.
right, and they don't have much in the way of central
Much
heating.
less, yeah.
Because normally it should be about 75 degrees in Mexico City right now, and it's way below that. It's like 40.
Oh, geez.
So A, side effects. B, ozone depletion. You put sulfur dioxide up in the air, it reduces the ozone layer and increases ultraviolet rays. All kinds of possible things can go wrong. And in fact, the UN in 2010 banned geoengineering at the Convention on Biological Diversity. But the UN police aren't going to show up at this guy's door because this doesn't work that way. But happily, Mexico has now banned geoengineering. Hopefully, this guy can be stopped. And like I say,
Viva Mexico, man.
yeah,
Seriously.
we have no way of knowing if he caused anything because he didn't have any kind of studies. There's no before and after. He literally just put this stuff up in the air and said, okay, let's put some more.
In Mexico, they don't even let foreigners buy land. Like, you could buy a house, but you don't own the land that the house is on.
Right.
That's how sort of iffy they, jumpy they still are about, foreigners coming, especially Europeans and Americans coming in and throwing their weight around.
Yeah. America's like this guy who
Yeah,
gives Americans a bad name.
Exactly.
So anyway, we have a caller. Caller, go right ahead.
So, this is Joe DeMare. I have to break into the recording here because, unfortunately, we had a very nice call from a regular caller named Kerry here, and he was telling us all about how in parts of the Maumee River, water snakes have come back, mainly because of the efforts of some scientists that are working on habitat restorations on some of the rocky islands that are in the river. Unfortunately, this recording was lost because the station's equipment malfunctioned, and the microphone that I've recorded the rest of the show on can't pick up phone calls. So we're very sorry that Carrie's call didn't get saved, but that's how it works sometimes. So back to the show.
Right, and it's amazing how often you find that there's like one person at the root of some of these rebounds, somebody who's just taken it on themselves to protect this species or that species. And water snakes actually are one of the kinds of food that that river otters eat. So by protecting one species, you sort of cleared the way for the return
What's
of
good
another.
for water snakes is good for the Maumee.
Yeah.
To put it another way.
Yeah, thank you,
Thanks.
Carrie. Thanks for the call. Yeah, some more good news, which, there's plenty of time for some more calls. If other people have some good news or some wildlife sightings, that'd be inspirational. 877-909-1007 or text 419-973-5841. And we need that good news going into our next story because this is not nearly so good. There is, we've had periods of mass extinctions before in the planet. And in fact, the end of the Permian period, it was, in fact, the greatest extinction in Earth's history. It's called the Great Dying. It was about 250 million years ago. And in that Great Dying, 96% of marine species all went extinct. And in a December 7th report in Science, scientists over at Stanford have figured out that actually what killed everybody was global warming. What happened is there was a bunch of volcanic eruptions in Siberia for a couple centuries. It put so much CO2 into the air that it warmed the planet by 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And what this study does, scientists have pretty much known this before, but what this study specifically did is it plugged in animals' metabolism, because most of the animals living in the ocean are actually cold-blooded, And what happened is, as the oceans got warmer, their metabolism rate went up. And so when your metabolism goes up, you need more oxygen. But warming the ocean actually reduces the amount of oxygen. And so basically 96% of life in the ocean suffocated at the end of the Permian. And so it does not, that does not bode well for us. And some of you might be saying, Joe, 20 degrees Fahrenheit, we're only so far talking like 2 or 3 degrees. Except that, once again, what is it that we're caught in, Rebecca?
Positive feedback loop.
Very good. You get a star today.
I can just be sound asleep, and I'll just suddenly wake up and say that if you ask me.
Right, and in a positive feedback loop, what happens is the whole system goes to its maximum level because you're feeding back. Every bit of CO2 you put in causes more CO2 to be released, and the best analogy most people know about is a feedback on a microphone, which causes, that screeching sound when the sound from the amplifiers gets into the microphone. And you can't end a positive feedback loop by having the band play louder and try to play over it. The only way you can end a positive feedback loop is to cut off the input. But once you cut off the input, that feedback loop collapses very quickly. So if we manage to stop carbon going into the air, we will survive, period. If we don't, we won't, also, period.
It's too bad it doesn't make an actual horrible screeching noise like that. Maybe people would notice.
Maybe they would, or maybe there'd just be a screeching noise earplug industry.
There you go, yeah. Probably.
Right.
It'd sell like, the mixes that you can play that distract you from the screeching noise.
Anti-screeching noise headphones, right? So, I know.
Oh.
All right. So, anyway, but on the idea, our next story, on the idea of reducing carbon, BP, British Petroleum, has finally projected demand for oil is going to start declining. And they are basing this on the fact that the Ukraine war has accelerated the shift over to green energy, to wind and solar and geothermal energy. They have something called their Energy Outlook Report, and they updated it on January 30th of this year. And that report, typical of what you'd consider of what you'd think an oil company would be reporting on in terms of global warming, has a 2050 timeline for getting to net zero. And of course, 2050 is too long. If we don't do it by 2030, society is probably going to collapse. But what they calculated was something called a new momentum calculation, which is they looked at the actual drop in demand. And their data isn't very good because their actual data only goes to 2018, and there's been a lot of change since 2018 to 2023. But even finally, the good part of this is that even an oil company, British Petroleum, is finally predicting the end of oil and basing it on current sales. Now, what they call the new momentum calculations, based on the fact that the demand is starting to drop, is like 3 times higher than the treaties that the United Nations has agreed to in terms of reducing global warming. So it's still way too high for us to survive. But at least they are starting to do it. And BP is, they are experts in greenwashing. For about 20 years, they called themselves Beyond Petroleum. They said, BP stands for Beyond Petroleum, not British Petroleum. In 2020, they finally stopped doing that because all they did for those 20 years was continue to put as much petroleum in the air as they could. And in fact, in 2011, they used to make solar panels. BP used to make solar panels, and I actually have a BP solar panel. It's a 75-watt panel that I bought 20 years ago, and it's still...
They're trying to end the use of petroleum by using it all up as fast as possible.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. So they're idiots. But we've reached the point where even idiots are acknowledging that we're moving away from petroleum finally. So the question is, are we moving fast enough? According to BP's calculations, no, we're not moving away fast enough to survive yet. But at least we've started going in the right direction. Okay, another step in the right direction. Germany just took another step. They've pledged $220 million to Brazil for protecting the Amazon. That's a story that was in the AP News on January 30th. And Svenja Schultz is, the spokesperson for the German government. They are given $38 million to the Amazon Fund, which funds sustainability projects in the Amazon, and $34 million to states in the Amazon to enforce regulations protecting forests and indigenous peoples, and $87 million to farmers who are trying to restore their lands to fertility, because once you cut down rainforest, you get about 2 years of farming, and then the ground basically turns to cement. And so they're trying to bring back some of those cement lands, which is good. Bolsonaro, the old evil president of Brazil, dissolved the Amazon Fund. Lula has reinstated it, and it's looking like this is really gonna, basically Germany and Norway. Norway is the main funder of the Amazon Fund, but it looks like at least a couple countries are starting to put their money where their mouth is and helping the Amazon recover. So that's good news.
Just out of curiosity, does anyone know who looked at the Amazon rainforest and thought this reminds them of ladies who will cut you? The Amazons.
Oh,
The lady with the swords and the bows and arrows and stuff. Like, you can't ride a horse in this stuff. It's jungle and swamp.
yeah, I do not know how we got from, the deep jungle to Greek mythology in the naming of this forest.
Yeah, sometimes it kind of quasi makes sense, but other times it's like, whatever, colonizers, if you're going to name something Amazon, what about like the Great Basin, where it's a great place to ride a horse and be a warrior on a horse?
Could be. Maybe they came across a matriarchal culture, because there are actually a number of those in North and South America.
Yeah, probably.
Pre-Columbian. So maybe they were just like, what, women running things? How is that even possible?
It was the one of the things that went wrong, I think, with the mutiny on the Bounty is that the guys who survived that were the ones who had defended the women of the native tribe who would come aboard their ship when the other guys were harassing them. Not coincidental, they were a matriarchal culture.
I did not know
It's
that.
like, you two guys get to be our slaves because you were nice to the matriarchs instead of dying.
I see. Okay. Well, anyway, so good news for the Amazon. Let's hope that makes rapid progress down there. Okay, next story. Interestingly, this one happened on December 12th. The National Association of Marine Labs, which has 100 member labs, including the laboratories of the Great Lakes right here in Ohio, they have released an official statement about the Japanese government plan to dump radioactive water from Fukushima into the Pacific Ocean. And pretty much the title of their white paper sums up the whole thing. It says, or no, this is not the title, this is a paragraph in there. It says, the underlying rationale of dilution ignores the reality of biological processes, which is something we've been saying right along. And that is, you can put radioactive isotopes into the ocean at incredibly tiny concentrations, like parts per billion, and it'll still get concentrated into the animals into the point where it will kill them.
Because big fish eat little fish.
Big fish eat little fish,
Yeah,
right? And everything in the little fish goes into the big fish. And,
They eat a lot of little fish, not just one or two.
Right. And they pointed out that the 100-member labs pointed out, we don't know what's in these tanks of water, or contaminated water, going to dump in, because, and this is science speak here, they said there's insufficient and in some cases incorrect data, which is science speak for they're lying.
Yeah, right.
Japan is lying when they say that this stuff is harmless and they can put as much as they want in the ocean without affecting anything. So that's 100 of these labs, which have the highest concentration of people who understand how the oceans work in the world. In other words, the experts are saying Japan sucks.
Yeah.
And don't let them dump radioactive water into the Pacific
Just
Ocean.
too bad because, like, well, while we're watching this show, for some reason, Josh always plays this TV program about interesting foods you could eat in Japan
Yeah, that's what we have going on the TV in
Yeah.
that studio.
every week.
And they were doing a lot of fish this week.
A lot of fish, yeah.
But,
I hope the fish is okay.
yes, sadly.
It looks good.
Yeah, that's the thing about radioactive fish. It looks
Yeah.
great, tastes great.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's full of stuff you don't want in you. So let's hope let's hope, because China has said we're going to stop you. All the other Pacific nations have said to Japan, don't do it. Unfortunately, the U.S. is saying, yeah, dump, which sucks. But
We're just full of good ideas.
yeah, but let's hope that this white paper from all our national marine labs, or international marine labs, because
Right.
marine labs all over the world have agreed
This
that
is a bad
China
idea.
should not do this. So let's
Yes.
hope that has some effect. All right, we are coming up on the end. So one more story, and I'm going to end on a positive note. Story in the BBC, and the title is "Enormous Heat Pumps Warming Cities," and this was a February 1st story, and the subtitle: "From New York City to rural Cornwall, communal heat pump networks could be the answer to decarbonize heat in both city high-rises and other hard-to-heat homes." And basically what they're finding is that you can make these huge underground networks of pipes to take the heat out of the ground, and you can heat entire cities without burning any carbon, heat and cool, because the way geothermal heat pump works is when it's hot, you put heat back into the ground, and then when it's cold, you take that heat you dumped in there and pull it back out and use it to heat your house. And it's incredibly efficient. In fact, you get 3 to 5 times as much heat energy out as you spend electrical energy running the pumps and the condensers and so forth. And so it's just smart. And the point of this story on the BBC is that they're actually now doing it in chunks of England, of the United Kingdom.
And now I've got that song, Hot Time Summer in the City, stuck in my head for God only knows how long. Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, sorry.
You should be.
It'll probably evaporate once we step outside. It's only, 36
There we go,
out
yeah. Probably so, yeah.
Yeah. But that does bring up a point that this whole week, actually, we had a below average
I'm
temperatures.
so hot for you, you're so cold.
This coming week, we're going up into the 50s this coming week, according to my cell phone weather prediction. So we're going to be back above average in just a little bit. So anyway, part of what was in this story is that right now UK 74%, 3/4 of the UK is heated with gas, and that accounts for 1/3 of the UK's greenhouse gas emissions. If this technology catches on, they're hoping to get rid of gas heat and be fully geothermal by like 2050. Again, a little too slow, United Kingdom. But again, it's a positive thing. Shows once again we've got the technology. We don't have to invent anything else. Forget these small modular reactors. All we need to do is apply what we've got, and we can literally, physically save the world. And so I guess that's probably a good note to end on. Thank you so much to everybody for listening. And thanks to our advertisers and patrons once again. If you have any comments on the show, you can email me at joe@joedemare for agreenfuture.org. It's JOEDEMAREFOR, agreenfuture.org. Love to hear from you, love to get comments back. And of course, you can call or text anytime, 419-973-5841. And I think that'll do it for this week. Thank you so much for listening. This is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
And we are signing off.
I don't want no oil spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time